If I were to ask you to imagine your world without bees, some of you might be happy. No more pests buzzing around, no more chance of being stung. Some of you might simply be unconcerned. But full disclosure, I've been working with insects for over 40 years now. And I have to tell you, I have become obsessed with the bees. Because you see, bees pollinate plants, including dozens of food crops, meaning they do the important work of transferring pollen from one plant to another, which allows plants to set seed and produce fruit. Think blueberries in Georgia or cranberries in Canada. Would we have food without the bees? Yes, but we would lose everything that adds color to our plates, from cantaloupe in Texas to sweet peppers in Spain, even delicacies like Ecuadorian coffee and chocolate benefit from bees. And I don't know about you, but I need my coffee and chocolate. So think of bees as that first domino in the food chain. Bees help plants survive. And we all know that plants are important because they produce food and oxygen. So, for those of you that also like to eat food and breathe air, I'm here to tell you our bees are in trouble and we need to do something about it fast. Now, when most of us think of bees, we think of the iconic honeybee. And honeybees do produce high quality food, honey, but they represent just a tiny fraction of all of the bee species. For example, in Georgia alone, we have 540 bee species. Let me show you a few of my favorites. First, the bumblebees. Now, these stout, hairy, robust bees are usually yellow and black, and they have the rare among insects capability to thermoregulate, meaning they can raise their own body temperature just by shivering to the minimum temperature required for flight. Now, there's our bumblebee on a thistle next to a sweat bee, obviously much smaller, and they have shorter tongues than most bees. They're attracted to perspiration, where they receive precious moisture and salts. Next are the leafcutter bees, so aptly named because they cut half moon sections from plants and roll them into these little cigar shaped cylinders where they rear their young. And who wouldn't love these flying jewels? The metallic green bees are very common in urban areas. They're about half the size of honeybees. They're easy to spot with those flashy green colors, but they can sometimes be mistaken for flies. Now, there are many things that can contribute to the decline of our bees, but loss of habitat through urbanization is recognized as a major driver. By the year 2030, urban land cover will have tripled compared to what it was in the year 2000. Sounds like bad news for bees, doesn't it? Despite the economic value of these biotic pollinators, $488 million in Georgia alone, the perception persists that cities are bad for bees. My question is this always true? Is there anything we can do? Or are we doomed? In the next few minutes, I hope to convince you that we can offer our bees a better life in the city and that you have a very important role to play in their success. In our efforts to better understand the effects of urbanization on our wild bees, my former graduate student, Amy Jambier, and I undertook a research survey, a survey of people's backyards. We had three questions we wanted to answer. First, how many bees are there? Second, how many different kinds of bees? How many species? And third, could we relate landscape context, meaning abundance of trees nearby, intensity of development, or even proximity to farms, to that bee abundance and diversity? Tragically, during the midst of our study, Amy lost her life in a terrible car accident. But despite their grief and a global pandemic, Amy's mother and aunt loaded their cars with Amy's bee samples and brought them to us. And then a small team of fellow students and faculty uh, finished that project and published the results in Amy's honor so that Amy's passion for pollinator protection would live on. Well, what did we learn? We were overwhelmingly surprised at the diversity we found. And you may be surprised to know that we documented 110 different species on these residential landscapes. Many, I'm sure, just like your own backyard. We also learned that the number of solitary bees and specialist bees like squash bees and cavity dwelling bees all increased with increasing development and urbanization. And not only that, the number of soil dwelling species and some of the social bee species increased with increasing forest remnant in the city. So while not all insects respond equally to urbanization, ultimately we concluded that the secret of cities is trees. In hindsight, this makes perfect sense. Historically, much of the eastern United States was forested. And this, of course, is where our bees originated. So now let's take a look at some of these bees in their natural habitat. And what you're going to see is a slow motion video of bees emerging from the soil in the spring. Beautiful sight. They emerge by the hundreds. Does this frighten you? Or fascinate you? Most of our wild bees are soil dwelling. And when they emerge in the spring, it creates quite a spectacle that few people get to observe for obvious reasons. They're usually running in the opposite direction. But notice the people that are filming this event. They're not dressed in these all white protective suits, and they don't appear to fear being stung. Insects, like other animals, often are more afraid of us than we are of them. And unlike mosquitoes, wild bees are usually very docile. They're interested in nectar and pollen, not blood. Another thing that may not be quite so obvious is that these bees are seeking out areas of thinning turf to make their homes. What a great excuse for the lawn police that object to the bare spots in your yard. Tell them those bare spots are intentional, it's where you keep your bees, and invite them to come check it out. I am happy to report that the conservation needle in recent years has moved slightly in the right direction. And we've discovered that the best way to get people involved is for them to have a direct positive experience with plants and bees. We've done a few simple things in order to promote pollinator spaces and encourage best management practices. We've raised awareness of factors that can negatively affect our bees, identified dozens of pollinator friendly plants, and created planting guides. created avenues like the annual pollinator census for public participation in citizen science, worked with local officials to add pollinator gardens to existing green spaces, partnered with schools to enhance STEM programs. There are so many different ways that you can be involved. And so far in Georgia, under Becky Griffin's leadership, this has resulted in over 20,000 participants who created more than 2,000 new pollinator gardens in 100 different counties and countless face to face positive interactions. So find ways to be involved. That pollinator census, for example, only takes 15 minutes of your time. On a global scale, forest cover is especially important to conservation planning for these mixed use landscapes. Forest cover has an especially strong effect on wild bees. And again, nearly a third of the bees are forest bees from the eastern United States. But say you live on a small space in the city and you want to protect pollinators, but you don't know how to start. Well, first things first, bees need what we all need: food, water, and a place to rear their young. So let me give you 5 things that you can do. First, let's tolerate a little messiness in our yards and gardens. Some of us can already check that box. Again, leave some bare spaces in your yard. Great excuse for the lawn police. Make sure your bees have access to water. Third, when you're trimming up the stems at the end of the season, leave a few stems for the nesting bees. Fourth, instead of a formal garden, go for the cottage garden with a riot of color all season long. And fifth, plant more trees for the bees. Now, I am completely persuaded that you can be the change that keeps Amy's dream alive and protects our pollinators. So be positive, be involved. Small changes lead to huge positive impacts for our bees. And remember, we're codependent. We need them as much as they need us, and the bees are counting on you to go out and spread the buzz. Thank you.